what I sort of like about my large, sprawling, lovable mess is that people can kind of move in and out as the topic interests them or doesn't interest them. And that's kind of how I operate. So it works for me because it's similar to my personality and how I like to function. I think that it's really important that you match your own energy when you set up your community, or you'll end up either creating something that you hate and you don't want to do anything with, or it will fail and you'll wonder why. And it's because you created something that wasn't a match for you.
Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. Today on the podcast, we have Cristin Downs. I have known her for quite some time now. I want to say ever since 2016, 17 that we've been in the same online spaces, and she has been able to grow quite a community with her podcast. So today we're talking about creating community with your podcast, how to make that decision, leaning into your curiosity and testing and trying new things, and what to do if you decide that you would like to transition your community from an online space like Facebook onto a different platform. What are those things to consider? I hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Join me in welcoming Cristin to the podcast. Hello, Cristin. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too.
It's going to be an incredible conversation. We go way back. And I feel like lately I've had quite a few people on that, like, we've been in the same circles for a while. And, you know, this kind of cult mix that is the entrepreneurial space of like intercircles connecting. But if you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and about your podcast.
Well, I am so excited to be here today. It's an honor, absolutely. And thank you for letting me speak with your listeners. So my name is Cristin. I'm from The Notable Woman, and I have had a podcast now for, I would say, 7 years. Now, everything Alicia teaches you, I have violated. So listen to her and don't do anything that I did. I just want to go ahead and say that. But my podcast is about conversations with women. The idea being that we are leaders who want to change the world in some way. And we're focused on that, doing that either through our own companies and organizations that we have founded and run, or through an organization where we work to get a seat at the leadership table and enact change in that way. And so we talk about the things that those kind of women are interested in. So we talk about chronic illness, and we talk about current events, and we talk about leadership, of course. And so the conversations are expansive, I would say. I love talking, so it's a great time for me. And it's been really fun. I really, really love the medium of podcasting. I think the intimacy you get from hearing someone speak is so fabulous and wonderful. And I do love to read, and I am really interested in long form content. But also, there's only so much screen time I can do as a person who runs a business online. So it really is really useful to be able to listen to content when I'm riding my bike, walking outside, doing the laundry, cooking dinner. So I just really love the medium, and I love that people can connect with me in that way. So that's my podcast. You can find me at thenotablewoman.com if you ever just want to listen to a really great, exciting conversation.
Awesome. And you have created quite a big community through the podcast and through that brand. How did that kind of come about? Did you start it with the intention of, I want to create community around this? Or was it something that was like, hey, I need to start creating space for these listeners? What kind of cart before the horse, or which one did it kind of go with?
So I would say that it really came out of following my curiosity. And this is always the recommendation that I give people when you aren't really sure what to do, is just what kind of has your interest, and you think, what would that look like? And you can find out quickly if it's a good idea or if it's not a good idea. I really love groups. I love community. I really do like people. And I like online communities because it's not the same sort of environment or energy that one has to have if you're going to have in-person community, if you're going to have a church group or an in-person book club or something where there is commitment. It has to be very time specific. Whereas online communities, people can come and go. They can interact in their different time zones. People can have really deep conversations or really surface level conversations, and it allows all of this to happen. So for me, I didn't set out to have a group, but what happened was that there was a consistent thing that I noticed, which was that people seemed to have a really hard time acknowledging the things that they did well. And I thought that if we could, in conversation, talk about the things that we did well and recognize those talents and those wins and honor each other, and also be there when things didn't go as planned, that it would have ripple effects. And so I started my group with a summit. That was great. It was amazing. I highly recommend it as a launch strategy. It just brings a lot of energy, a lot of different types of people all into the same space. And so that's how it started. And then people really liked it, so they stayed. And I think the thing about this type of content, and I really think almost all content, is that people like to discuss, they like to engage. This is why there are book clubs. This is why there are film critics, right? When people engage with some sort of content and it strikes them in some way, they want to have a further conversation about it, which is why podcast communities have gone so well.
Yes, I think about even the podcast communities around like true crime and like those kinds of topics, like those ones, it gets so much engagement and people talking, because it's like, hey, I like something weird, you like something weird, cool, we can relate on this, and just finding that common thread to kind of connect people through. Do you think that because your topics tend to be broader while still umbrellaed under like women being awesome, that it allows you to reach a wider audience? Do you think that's beneficial to you? Or do you think that maybe if you were more specific, you'd be able to get a different range of people? Or what do you feel about like if someone is like, well, I'm talking to a more specific niche and maybe a community might not be right for me because maybe there's not enough people that are going to be engaged. Do you feel that having that bigger, wider space allows you to kind of pull people in different directions based on what you're talking about? Or do you think that there is room still for people who have those smaller audience sizes?
I think it absolutely can work for everyone, whether your audience is small or your niche or your niche is very narrow, or if it's very large. I think it can work for everybody. I'm in a community that just launched from Slobbered Lens Photography, and it's all about grief around your furry family members who have passed away. Mm-hmm. And it's a very small community, and it's great. It's wonderful because you can have these in-depth conversations when other people might say, this is not a conversation worth having, right? Mm. So even very, very small groups of people can have successful, deep relationships in online communities, just like you would in a book club or a Bible study or whatever it is. However you get down in an in-person community, you can create all of that in your podcast community. What I sort of like about my large, sprawling, lovable mess is that people can kind of move in and out as the topic interests them or doesn't interest them. And that's kind of how I operate. So it works for me because it's similar to my personality and how I like to function. I think that it's really important that you match your own energy when you set up your community, or you'll end up either creating something that you hate and you don't want to do anything with, or it will fail and you'll wonder why. And it's because you created something that wasn't a match for you.
I think that leads us to a really good point is creating boundaries around community. What have you seen work really well for you in creating those boundaries? And whether it's people sliding in your DMs or answering questions nonstop in the community. And obviously it's a free community, so you want to be able to give your time to the things that are going to provide for your family while still having and holding space for people in the free space.
I think that's a wonderful question. And the most important point is to have some boundaries. And it's always true that boundaries are best set first. Yeah. So if you do not have a boundary set and then people start pushing you in different directions and you want to set one, it's going to be far harder to tighten that boundary than it would be to loosen one that you set a little too tightly. So for me, as a person who has trouble with boundaries, I set sort of no boundaries, no rules of any kind. And then, of course, what happens is that people do things that make you go, oh, that's creative and unexpected and bad. And so how can I make sure that doesn't happen again? And so through those moments, I created different types of boundaries. And I think that for me, the best boundaries have been personal ones around social media, that I could totally dive into social media on my phone and wake up hours later, time totally lost, nothing done, just engaging with folks. And I could get the same results if I set a very small period of time where I go in, talk to people, and then stop, right? So one of the boundaries that I've set is that I don't get engaged with group stuff on my phone. I do it at my computer, and it's set time that I've put aside in my schedule. This is when I go and engage with my group comments and feedback and all of that. The other thing that I've had a little bit of trouble with that I've had to set boundaries around is the idea of when are my group events. Because I'm on the East Coast, my audience is primarily American. And of course, I am an includer, and I always want everyone to be a part of it. And so I want to have a good time selected so that everyone can participate. But I'm also a grandma in my personality.
Not literally, guys.
Not literally. Not literally. My son is a tiny human. But I definitely want to do events at times of the day where I do not have energy to do events. And so just recognizing that you are not Oprah, you are not Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle or some entity that has a giant staff and a huge brand and all of that. You know, I am one person. And so I can't have events at all times of day for all types of people. And so I had to really put restrictions on myself about when am I comfortable doing events in my group where I'll have enough energy that I'll enjoy them and not, beat myself up over the fact that I scheduled this in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good boundary to have. And I definitely agree. I am a night person. And so an evening thing might work for me, but at that point, I'm already kind of touched out as an introvert. Like, I'm done peopling. Mm-hmm. By the evening, I'm like, this is me time. I'm going to read a book. Even sitting next to my husband, like, don't touch me. I'm reading my book. Just you stay over there. You watch your show. We can spend time together in the same vicinity, not touching. Leave me alone. Mm-hmm. At that point of the day, I'm just kind of done. So I do tend to have my events and membership times of like, hey, we're doing live trainings during the afternoon when I have the most energy possible to bring to people.
No, I think that makes sense. And so setting things that make sense for you boundary-wise. And so that takes some self-reflection, and not everybody is great at self-reflection, but you can do something like maybe create a note in your notes app where you say, when do I have energy to do XYZ? When do I feel really tired? One thing to think about is, when do you interact with your clients or whoever it is that gives you money? that is a good time to not schedule group events because you're going to be doing other things. So for me, a lot of my clients book right after their workday ends, so 4 or 5 o'clock, which then already takes me to maybe 6:30. And after that, I am done. So done. So I also can't, I can't do 3 or 4 client sessions in a row and have any energy after that. It's over. It's done. It's stare at the wall time. So I think that those things have ebbed and flowed as my business has grown, and being able to respond to them. Because certainly when I first started, I had no business. I just had a podcast, and so I could do whatever I wanted. I mean, I had 9 to 5. I worked. So I had to adjust around that. But very different when my money is what sustains my family, my work, my business. So I've had to adjust things as my business has grown.
Yeah, I definitely understand that and saw something very similar when I ended up turning my business into my full thing and like really trying to test different ideas on when do I work best, what works best for me and my schedule. To your point earlier, like testing things out and trying things and like kind of following your curiosity and like, well, what's going to work? And so I would try different things like, okay, I'm going to have an entire week of calls. And then the next week, I'm not going to have any calls. And I tried that. And I was like, the week of calls burnt me out. I was absolutely exhausted. It was too many calls. The week of no calls was boring because I didn't see anyone at all. And I like to see someone at least once a week. So like I needed that happy medium. So I ended up blocking off my Mondays and my Fridays. So that kind of lets me ease into the week, ease out of the week. To your point about like not having so many client calls each day, I have it set where clients can only book 2 calls during the day. So one client can book the call, another one can, but the third one can't get in on that day. They have to pick a different day. And that way I don't get burnt out. It also allows me space to do the other things that I need to get done, for the clients. So testing things out, trying them, I think is definitely the way to go, especially with the boundaries. If you're someone who struggles with them, trying things out, figuring out what's going to work best for you, and giving yourself grace, kind of like, I mean, we're both parents, so we can understand this, giving yourself grace and like trying to manage people. Like when you're managing little humans who have their own little opinions, it's difficult as well. So like throw in some adults, you're fine trying to navigate that.
And for most people who are listening, they have to navigate whatever their interaction is with people to get clients. So their sales calls or discovery calls or whatever that is. And then whatever the delivery is. And then you probably have some time by yourself that you have to do the thing that you sell. And then you have things like this conversation that we're having, right? So you have your podcast interviews or press or PR type stuff. And you have a podcast yourself. So you have to do those also. So then fitting the group in really has to fit around all of that, but it still has to be successful. You can't come in and not bring any energy and think of it as an afterthought. And you can tell when you're in someone's group and they hate their group, you can tell. And it's so fascinating that even though we're online, even just in how people talk, even in how they type, I'm not watching them type, but the words that they say or when they respond or how they react and all of those sort of things. And I think that one of the big ways for you to know if a group is not for you is if people are commenting on things in your group and you don't want to talk to them at all. If you can't, generate any interest in having a conversation with someone who wants to have a conversation with you, that's a good sign that maybe a group is not for you. But if it is for you, there's so many different ways that you can use a group to test ideas, to do some research, to, just talk to people, right? And people will bring ideas to you that you didn't think about or things that are happening in different spaces that you wouldn't know. And I think that it's really lovely. And even if you are an introvert, you don't have to be an extrovert to enjoy having a group. You just have to enjoy having conversations with the people who engage with your work. That's really the only thing that is a necessary factor. Everything else you can manage in some way, energy-wise.
You put your heart and your soul into your show. And I want to help you reach all of those potential listeners out there. That's why I'm excited to announce my upcoming podcast marketing workshop. It's about giving you practical tools to grow your audience. You'll learn the secrets to getting your podcast discovered, attracting your dream listeners, and boosting those download numbers. This workshop will be hosted live with a replay available on April 30th. You can sign up by going to galatimedia.com/workshop. Let's grow our podcasts together. There's even community managers that you can hire to keep engagement high if you need to. Like, there's plenty of different ways to do it. But I definitely understand the whole aspect of, like, you can tell if someone doesn't really like their group or if they're like, meh. I feel like that very strongly about my group. Not in that I don't like them. I like my community. If they have questions, I'm always happy to answer them. I like answering those questions. I like interacting with them. But I don't like Facebook. Like, I don't like being on Facebook. I don't like Facebook notifications. I get annoyed. And I'm kind of at the point in my life where, like, I don't care what my family members are doing. If they need me, they can call me. I mean, I sound like an old lady, but I don't really care. I would much rather be having conversations in my Instagram DMs than be in groups. And so I'm going to be moving my Facebook community onto the platform that I host my paid community and my paid membership and that community aspect of it, which is Circle. I know you're doing something very similarly in moving people from Facebook to another place. And one question that I asked myself when I was transitioning and was brought to me of like, hey, consider this question, was, are people in the group saying that they'd much rather be on another space? So if you are on a space like Facebook and you're like, ugh, does your audience feel very similarly before you transition? What are some of those things that you kind of considered as well in considering the transition from Facebook to another place?
So many things. Let's see. I'm going to tag through them. So one was just noticing that overall people's engagement on Facebook was down across many, many groups. I believe there's a lot of different reasons for that. Some is because Facebook itself has adjusted their group algorithm because of issues that they've had around politics and propaganda and those sort of things. So they've instituted some changes, which have, I think, suppressed groups when for a long time they were using the algorithm to amplify groups. So some of that engagement was false, right? It's created, forged in an algorithm. And I noticed that engagement was just generally down. I have opinions about a lot of the things that Facebook has done business practice wise and some of the political moments that they have been either part of or accidentally responsible for across the globe that have been very serious. And a lot of the folks in my community are social justice oriented. So Facebook having a hand in many of these things caused them to be unhappy with them as a platform. I would say another thing I thought about is that why Facebook works for groups now is mostly because of accidental engagement. So people are on their phone, they're scrolling, they haven't turned off your group from their feed, and so they see the post and so they engage with you. So it's not intentional, it is accidental, and a lot of people have done really well with group engagement and using their group for whatever larger business strategy it's a part of. And I really, really, really want my folks to be intentionally engaging with my content. That's what I'm encouraging them to do when I coach with them. I want them to be making active choices about how they spend their time. And so if that's what I want people to do, then my group should be a part of that same practice. And so I have wanted to do it for a really long time, but it also felt like a lot of work, so much work. And I think I had to be in several other communities that were off of Facebook that were going really well before I felt like I could do it too. Seeing other people pull their communities off Facebook, running them in things like Discord or Circle, seeing them go so well, seeing that people would come, and not everybody is going to come because some people haven't had your group notifications turned on since 2017 or something, you know, but the people who actually like your content are going to come over with you. And I do think that either the platform that you're going with or your own personal email game has to be strong, because the reason that people show up to things on Facebook is just because they have it open and they're scrolling on their phone. And obviously this is a certain age group, because there's certain age groups that aren't on Facebook at all. But that's why a lot of people have gotten that engagement. And so I feel pretty good about the platforms that exist right now. Circle does this as well. The one that I'm going to go over to is Heartbeat, but they have these ways where you can nest communities inside each other, which I think is really great. And they also have the ability for the platform to send sort of a digest email, which is great, so that you don't have to worry about it. And then you can also add, whatever you want to into your own regular email campaigns. And so I think that those would be the three big things. Noticing other people's engagement was really down, feeling slightly icky about Facebook and its larger place in the world, and wanting people to be intentional in how they engage with my work.
Yeah, because you want people to show up, right? It's like the whole idea of people unsubscribing to our email list, and the initial reaction, right, is always, "Aw, oh no, they left." But then the afterthought is like, "But I don't want them here if they don't want to be here." Right? We don't want people, clogging up space that where we want to pour into people and give them content and give them, value if they don't want to be there. And the same goes for Facebook groups. It's a vanity metric of these people said yes years ago, maybe, and they're still there, but maybe they're not seeing it at all. So I totally understand that. What made you kind of decide to go with Heartbeat, you said, right, was the one that you were going with? I know you and I have talked offline about quite a few different communities and ideas and spaces. And I can go through why I decided on member space for my membership and then adding on Circle for the community aspect. But I'd love to hear kind of how you whittled that list down.
Well, I tried everything under the sun. I mean, almost everything, but I had a really specific idea in my head of what I wanted to happen. So I very much want everything I do to nest inside everything else. So I want, in whatever my online community was going to be, I wanted my coaching clients to be able to live there, my programs to be able to live there, my memberships, people who bought one-off courses, and then the podcast community, and then the little offshoots of that where we talk about books and we talk about, other creative consumption type ideas. So I wanted all that to live together. And I am obsessively weird about organization. So I very much knew what I wanted the spaces to look like and be like. And so I really, really, really like Discord. And I really want to be able to use Discord. But the way that Discord organizes the threads does not work for my brain at all.
Yeah. It's very much like Slack, which I also feel very, I have one game that I play on my phone that I'm on a Discord with my alliance in there. And I don't really play a lot of games, but this one I like. And so I like the community aspect of it. And Discord is super confusing for me. And the organization, it makes my brain hurt. Trying to respond to people makes my brain hurt. The threads, I cannot. But Slack, I feel very similarly about that as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree. They have very similar functionality. And the only way, in my opinion, that Slack and Discord work for my brain, right? I know they work for other people's brains, but for my brain, the only way I can work those platforms is if I am in them constantly. I have to be there at least daily to figure out what the hell is going on. And I don't want anything in my life that I have to interact with that much. Maybe coffee.
Right.
That's like it. I just don't want to have that relationship. And I know that I adore and love my audience into tiny little itty bitty bitty morsels, but they are not the tech savvy folks. And so if I brought them into a platform that I thought was, it would just be a disaster because I wouldn't be able to guide them. Because I would say, I too am confused about all of these threads. And so how would that work? So even though I love the mission of Discord and I love the way they have their company set up and I love so much of the platform, so much functionality of it, I just could not, no matter how many times I said, okay, this is the day we're going to, and I joined a lot of Discords. I'm in several for journalists I follow that I really like, but I just couldn't get there. So on my journey, interacted with everything under the sun. And I think that, I'm going to say it was Suzanne Proxa, who's another online business person, who sent me a message that AppSumo had a deal on a community platform. And I said, I'll go right now and take a look at it. And so I went and looked at Heartbeat. And to me, it seemed like the perfect combination of Discord and Circle. Because I really like Circle. There were a couple things that I didn't like. I really like Discord, but it confuses me. But what Circle has, that Heartbeat also has, is the way it organizes the thread and the posts is so easy and clean. And so that was something I really liked about Circle. But it also has some of the functionality that Discord has in the way that people can interact with each other. And so that's why I ultimately decided on Heartbeat, because it had pretty much everything I wanted in one place. So now I'm at the point where I have not moved over my larger podcast community. I have moved over my programs and my membership. Those are the, sort of two groups that are in there right now. And I think that the biggest thing is the idea that I need to create that same kind of energy that I created when I first started my group. Because why will people come? Because there's something happening here that they want to engage with. If you don't make it interesting and immediate, they'll say, oh, I'll do that whenever I have time or whatever. And they'll never have time because it's really not life or death, right? So if you can give them an immediate need, we're going to have a guest. We are going to be talking about something particular. I'm going to be answering questions for free on such and such topic. Those are all ways that people can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and join today because I want to go and see that thing tonight. But with the program people, it's just, hey, you want your link for co-working? It's in here, that sort of thing, so that they'll all go over and join. And again, I don't know if there's anything really you could mention that I hadn't tried, but that was why I made the decision, is because it had a combination of everything I really liked in a way that worked for my brain.
So a lot of what we've talked about, I feel like, has been being intentional while still allowing yourself to be curious and test things and try things and realize that it might not work out exactly how you want it to, but being open to whatever direction it goes. And so I really love that about your journey through creating the community. And I'm pretty sure that the first time I got into your community was through a summit, if I'm remembering correctly. And I want to say it was 2017, maybe? So quite a while ago.
I think that makes sense, because when you said we've known each other for a long time, I thought, oh no, is she going to ask me how? Because I'm going to have to go through the folders and cross over the aisle. And is it in this one? And no, it's maybe back over here. So, but that actually does sound right. I think that is exactly what it was.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this and the ins and outs of creating and figuring out the community and finding what works best for you. If you could tell everybody again where they can find you, hang out with you, listen to your podcast, or if they're like, hey, I like this idea, I want to be in that community, where can they go join?
Go to thenotablewoman.com. All my socials link off of there. I am primarily on Instagram. And I don't sell any courses around this or anything. This is not my business, but I love talking about it. So if you want to talk about your community, how it's working, how it's not working, something you want to kind of riff with somebody about, please send me a DM. I'm so happy to chat with you about it. And the podcast is The Notable Woman. You can find it on all podcast platforms.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.